A 17-year-old boy, Morgan, sits in the first-class seat he paid for. A flight attendant looks at his hoodie, his sneakers, and his skin, and decides he doesn't belong. She tries to move him. She threatens him. She calls security to have him dragged off the plane. What she doesn't know is that the entire flight, the airline's reputation, and her entire career are about to come to a crashing halt. Because the teenager she is trying to humiliate just sent one text, and the most powerful man in the state is already on his way. Stay tuned to find out the instant, hard karma that hit when the governor arrived. The controlled chaos of JFK International Airport was a familiar hum to 17-year-old Morgan Thompson. He navigated the crowded terminal, his expensive noise-cancelling headphones providing a muffled soundtrack to the stream of announcements and rolling suitcases. He was tall for his age, with a thoughtful expression, dressed in the comfortable uniform of a modern teenager. A high-quality grey hoodie, dark jeans, and immaculate Jordan sneakers. He was flying solo from New York to Washington, D.C., a short hop, but one he'd made often. This time, however, he was flying first class. It was a rare treat, a well done from his father for acing his midterms, and, more practically, to ensure he had peace to work on his college application essays during the flight. His father, Elias Thompson, was a man who valued punctuality and quiet performance. Morgan had inherited the latter, if not always the former. He preferred to observe, to listen, and to not draw attention to himself, a trait that was about to be severely tested. At Gate B42, the line for Global Air Flight 121 was already divided. The priority lane for first class and platinum members was nearly empty. Morgan pulled out his digital boarding pass, displaying Seat 1A, and walked toward the gate agent. The agent, a man in his late 30s with a tight-collared shirt and a name tag reading Max Jennings, was busy typing. When Morgan stepped up, Jennings looked up, and his eyes did a quick, almost imperceptible scan. Hoodie, sneakers, teenager, black. He paused, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. "May I help you?" Jennings's tone was flat, lacking the practiced warmth reserved for premium passengers. "Hi, I'm just boarding," Morgan said, holding up his phone. Jennings scanned the pass. Beep. He looked at the screen, then back at Morgan. "This is the first-class line, son." "Yes, sir. Seat 1A," Morgan replied politely, pointing to the screen. Jennings frowned. He seemed to be looking for a problem. He tapped at his keyboard, perhaps expecting the system to flag an error. When it didn't, he sighed, his annoyance barely concealed. "Fine, go ahead." He didn't say, "Enjoy your flight." He didn't make eye contact. He just gestured him through. Morgan felt the familiar, uncomfortable prickle. He'd felt that look before, the look that questioned his presence in spaces where others felt he didn't belong. He let it roll off his back, attributing it to a man having a bad day. He walked down the jet bridge, his mind already shifting to the essay he needed to finish. He was the third person to board the first-class cabin. He saw his seat, 1A, a spacious pod by the window, and felt a small thrill. He slid his backpack into the oversized overhead bin, sat down, and began to pull out his laptop. He was settling in, headphones going back on, when a voice, sharp and laced with artificial sweetness, cut through the cabin's quiet. "Excuse me, sir." Morgan looked up. A flight attendant, with a severe blonde bun and a name tag that read Sophia Adler, was standing over him. Her arms were crossed, and her smile was a thin, painted-on line. "Can I help you?" Morgan asked, pulling one headphone cup off his ear. "I'm going to need to see your boarding pass," Sophia said. Her eyes weren't just looking at him. They were assessing him, dissecting him. "Oh, sure." Morgan, thinking she was just doing her job, unlocked his phone and showed her the screen. Sophia Adler squinted at the glowing pass. She leaned in, her perfume overwhelmingly strong. Morgan Thompson, seat 1A. She said his name as if it were a riddle she was trying to solve. "That's me," Morgan said. She stood back up, her smile completely gone. "I'm afraid there's been a mistake." A cold knot formed in Morgan's stomach. "What kind of mistake?" "This seat," Sophia said, gesturing to the plush leather pod, "is not for you. We've had a last-minute equipment swap. The seating chart is all messed up. I'm going to have to find you another seat." Morgan frowned, but the gate agent scanned it. It went through. It says 1A right here. "The gate agent," Sophia said, drawing the words out as if they were an insult, "clearly didn't get the memo. He's new." She forced another smile, this one even more strained. "It's fine. We have a perfectly lovely seat for you in economy. I'm sure you'll be much more comfortable back there." The implication was clear. It hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Comfortable meant with your own kind. Morgan felt a flush of anger, but he kept his father's voice in his head. "Don't meet emotion with emotion. Meet it with facts. Stay calm." "Ma'am, I appreciate that. But this is the seat I was assigned and the one I paid for," Morgan said, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm working on a college essay, and I need the space. I'd prefer to stay here." Sophia's mask of politeness cracked. Her eyes narrowed. "Sir, I don't think you're understanding me. This seat is occupied. The passenger who is supposed to be here will be arriving shortly." This was a new lie, a clumsy pivot. "But I'm the passenger," Morgan insisted. "You just saw my boarding pass." "Boarding passes can have errors," she snapped. The ma'am and sir routine was over. "Now I'm not going to ask you again. Please take your belongings, and I will escort you to your correct seat." By now, other first-class passengers were boarding. A man in a tailored suit settled into 2D. A woman with kind eyes and silver hair, Stella Jenkins, took her seat in 2B, directly behind Morgan. She was clearly watching the interaction, her brow furrowed in concern. "I'm not moving," Morgan said, his voice dropping. He wasn't being belligerent. He was stating a fact. "My ticket is valid. You can check your system. If there's an issue, I'm happy to talk to the captain. But I am not giving up my seat based on your word." Sophia Adler's face turned a dull, angry red. This boy, this child in a hoodie, was defying her. In her cabin. "You're creating a scene," she hissed, leaning down. "And you're holding up the boarding process. If you're going to be non-compliant, I will have no choice but to call security and have you removed from the aircraft." "Removed?" Morgan was stunned. "For sitting in the seat I paid for?" "For failing to follow crew instructions," she retorted, her voice rising, now loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "We have a zero-tolerance policy." She looked at him with pure disdain and said the words that would seal her fate. "People like you always try to pull these stunts. You think you can just waltz in here and take whatever you want. It's not happening. Not on my flight." "People like me," Morgan repeated, his voice barely a whisper. Before he could say another word, Sophia straightened up, pulled out her staff phone, and made a call. "This is Sophia, the lead on Flight 121. I need a gate supervisor and airport security at the jet bridge. I have a passenger in 1A who is refusing to deplane. He's aggressive." Morgan's blood ran cold. Aggressive? He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't moved. He was just sitting. Stella Jenkins, the woman in 2B, gasped. "That is an outrageous lie." Sophia shot her a look. "Ma'am, stay out of this." "I will not," Stella said, her voice carrying the clear, sharp authority of someone used to being heard. I am an attorney, and I am witnessing what appears to be blatant harassment." Sophia ignored her. She turned back to Morgan. "Last chance. Are you walking off, or are you being carried off?" The atmosphere in the cabin changed from uncomfortable to openly hostile in a second. The man in 2D was now filming on his phone, his face a mask of disapproval. Stella Jenkins had pulled out a notebook and was taking meticulous notes. Morgan felt trapped. His heart was hammering. He could see the headlines. "Aggressive teen dragged off flight." He knew how this looked. He knew how the story would be spun. Sophia Adler was counting on that. "Ma'am, I am not being aggressive," Morgan said, holding his hands up, palms open, in a gesture of non-aggression. "I am just trying to fly to DC. Please, just look up my ticket. My name is Morgan Thompson. The ticket was purchased on my father's credit card. Elias Thompson. You can verify it." "Oh, Elias Thompson," Sophia sneered, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I'm sure he's a very important man. We're done talking." She marched to the front of the plane, where Max Jennings, the gate agent, had just appeared at the door, flanked by 2 uniformed Port Authority officers. "That's him," Sophia said, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at Morgan. "The one in 1A, he's non-compliant. His ticket is fraudulent and he's refusing to move." Fraudulent. The accusation hit Morgan like a slap. He hadn't just been accused of being in the wrong seat. He was now being accused of a crime. Max Jennings, the gate agent who had given Morgan the side eye earlier, now looked emboldened. He walked down the aisle with the officers. "Sir," Jennings said, his voice artificially deep, "you were told there was a mistake. You need to come with us now. We can sort this out in the terminal." "There is no mistake," Morgan insisted, his voice finally rising, tinged with desperation. "This is my seat. Why is no one listening to me? Just check the passenger manifest." "We already know the manifest, son," Jennings said condescendingly. "The seat is not yours. Now, are you coming quietly?" One of the officers, a tall man named Peterson, looked uncomfortable. He glanced at the other passengers, saw the phones, and then at Morgan, who looked more like a scared kid than a threat. "Ma'am," Officer Peterson said to Sophia, his voice a low rumble. "What exactly is the problem here? Is the flight overbooked?" "The problem," Sophia said, "is that he's in a seat that isn't his, and he's refusing to move. He's delaying an entire flight." "That's not true," Stella Jenkins interjected, standing up. "Officer, my name is Stella Jenkins. I'm a partner at Jenkins & Associates. This flight attendant, Sophia Adler, has been harassing this young man since he sat down. She never claimed the flight was overbooked. First, she said the seat was broken, then she said it was double booked, and now you're hearing fraudulent. She is lying and she is targeting him." Sophia's face contorted in rage. "How dare you? I'm calling the captain." "Please do," Morgan said, finding a sliver of courage. "Call the captain. I'll talk to him." "The captain's not coming out for you," Sophia spat. Max Jennings stepped forward. "Look, kid, I don't want to do this. Just grab your bag. We'll get you on the next flight. In coach, where you belong." That was it. The final straw. The humiliation was complete. Morgan's hands were shaking. He felt small, powerless, and utterly profiled. He was just a kid in a hoodie. To them, he was nothing. He had one last resort. He pulled out his phone. He didn't text his dad's personal number. He texted his father's chief of staff, a woman named Clara. He typed a simple, frantic message. "Clara, I'm on Global Air 121 at JFK, Gate B42. They are trying to remove me from the flight. They say my ticket is fake and are threatening to arrest me. Please help." He hit send. Then he looked up at the officers and the 2 smug airline employees. "I am not moving," Morgan said. You will have to drag me out, and everyone here will see it." Sophia Adler smiled, a thin, cold smile of victory. "Officers, he's made his choice. Remove him." The officers exchanged a look, and Officer Peterson took a step into the aisle, his hand moving toward his belt. "Son, please don't make this difficult." Suddenly, a different kind of tension filled the air. A crackle came over the gate agent's radio. Then, Sophia's staff phone buzzed violently. She glanced at it, her smug expression faltering. She answered it. "This is Adler." She listened. Her face, which had been red with anger, drained to a ghostly white. Every drop of color vanished. Her eyes went wide with sheer, unadulterated terror. She looked at Morgan, not as a nuisance, but as if she were seeing a ghost. "Yes," she whispered into the phone. "Yes, I understand. Yes, right away." She hung up. She was trembling. "What is it, Sophia?" Max Jennings asked, annoyed. Sophia Adler looked at Officer Peterson. "Stand down. Everyone. Just stand down." "What's going on?" Jennings demanded. "The gate," Sophia said, her voice a strangled squeak. They're holding the flight. They're stopping all operations at B-42. "What? For him?" Jennings scoffed. "Who the hell is he?" From the open cockpit door, a new voice emerged. Captain Robert Miller, a man with silver-grey hair and an impeccable uniform, stepped into the cabin, his face like thunder. He had clearly been listening on the cabin line. "That," Captain Miller said, his voice booming in the enclosed space, "is an excellent question, Mr. Jennings. One you both should have asked." He looked past them, down the aisle. "Miss Adler, Mr. Jennings, into the jet bridge. Now, you are off my flight." "Captain, Sophia started. "Now!" he roared. As the two shell-shocked employees stumbled out, the jet bridge door opened again. But it wasn't a ramp supervisor. It was 3 men in dark, perfectly tailored suits. 2 were built like brick walls, with earpieces and an air of lethal calm. The man in the middle, tall and radiating an intensity that seemed to suck the air out of the cabin, was Elias Thompson. He scanned the cabin, his eyes landing on his son. He didn't look angry. He looked cold. It was the look Morgan knew well. It was the look that preceded a political opponent's worst day. He walked down the aisle and stopped. He looked at the 2 officers, who instinctively took a step back. He looked at the gaping hole where Sophia and Max had been. Then he looked at his son. "Morgan," he said, his voice perfectly level. "Are you all right?" Morgan could only nod, the adrenaline draining out of him, leaving him shaking. Governor Elias Thompson turned his head, his gaze sweeping over the other passengers, before landing on Stella Jenkins in 2B. "Ma'am," he said, his voice quiet but carrying. "I am Governor Thompson. That is my son. Can you please tell me exactly what happened here?" The cabin was silent, save for the hum of the auxiliary power. The other passengers, who had been a mix of annoyed and entertained, were now sitting stock still, realizing they were witnesses to something far more significant than a simple seating dispute. The man in 2D had his phone pointed directly at the governor, his hands shaking slightly. Stella Jenkins, the attorney, was all business. "Governor Thompson," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I'm Stella Jenkins. I'm a lawyer. I watched your employee, Ms. Sophia Adler, attempt to forcibly downgrade your son from his paid-for seat. When he politely refused, she accused him of having a fraudulent ticket, called him aggressive, and tried to have these officers remove him from the plane. She and the gate agent, Mr. Jennings, were derogatory, unprofessional, and, in my legal opinion, engaging in textbook racial profiling." Governor Thompson absorbed this information without blinking. His 2 security agents, Barnes and Sullivan, stood like statues at the front of the cabin, effectively blocking the exit. "Ms. Jenkins, thank you. I'd like your card," the governor said. "Of course," she replied, already retrieving one. Elias Thompson turned to the cockpit. "Captain?" Captain Robert Miller stepped forward, his face grim. "Governor, I am Captain Miller. I cannot begin to apologize enough for what you and your son have experienced on my aircraft. The behavior you've described is not the standard of global air." "And yet," Governor Thompson said, his voice dangerously soft, "it just happened. Your lead flight attendant and your gate agent attempted to have my 17-year-old son, a ticketed passenger, arrested. Not because the flight was overbooked, not because of a seating discrepancy, but because—" "Why?" He turned to Morgan. "Morgan, what were her exact words?" Morgan swallowed. She said, "People like me try to pull these stunts, and that I should be in coach, where I belong." The governor's jaw tightened. He turned back to the captain. "Your crew, Captain, has a problem. And now you have a problem. This flight is not taking off." "Sir, I've already removed them from the flight," Captain Miller said hastily. "We can get a replacement crew." "You misunderstand me, Captain," Elias Thompson interrupted. "This isn't a crew issue anymore. This is a corporate issue. This flight is grounded. My son is not flying today. Not on this plane, not with this airline. We are disembarking, and I suggest you tell your corporate office to expect my call." He put a hand on Morgan's shoulder. "Get your bag, son." As Morgan, still trembling, stood up to get his backpack, a new figure appeared at the jet bridge door. This man was wearing an ill-fitting suit, slick with sweat, and a Global Air Operations badge. He was the station manager. "Governor Thompson, sir, please," the man panted, rushing forward. "I'm David Miller, the station manager. There's been a terrible misunderstanding." "There's been no misunderstanding, Mr. Miller," Governor Thompson said, not even looking at him. "There has been clarity. My son was threatened and humiliated. I'm taking him home. Please, sir, we can fix this. We'll get you a private jet. Whatever you need," Miller pleaded. This was the moment of the twist. This was the part Sophia Adler and Max Jennings could never have anticipated. They hadn't just insulted a random teenager. They hadn't just insulted the governor. They had done it on the worst possible day, at the worst possible time. Elias Thompson finally turned to face the station manager. His security detail, Barnes and Sullivan, subtly shifted, creating a barrier. "Mr. Miller," the governor said, "do you know where I was just now, before my chief of staff received my son's text message?" Miller looked confused. "Sir, at home, in the lounge?" "I was in your CEO's office, Mr. Miller, right here in Terminal 4. I was with your CEO, Michael Vance. We were 30 minutes away from a joint press conference to announce a new $500 million state tax credit for Global Air to build its new maintenance hub right here in New York. We were going to talk about partnership and community." The station manager's jaw dropped. The blood drained from his face. He looked like he was going to be sick. "Your CEO, Mr. Vance," the governor continued, his voice like ice, "is waiting for me on a stage right now. He's about to text me to ask where I am. And I'm going to walk over there with my son, and I'm going to tell him exactly what happened. I'm going to tell him how his employees treat people like my son. I'm going to tell him how they treat the community." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that was more terrifying than any shout. "So you go back to your office, Mr. Miller, and you tell your people that the press conference is off, the deal is off, and that your CEO needs to call his board because he is about to have the worst quarter of his entire career. No, Governor, please. Miller was hyperventilating. It was 2 employees. Just 2. They'll be fired. I'll fire them myself. Right now. You're not listening, Governor Thompson said, straightening his tie. He put his hand on Morgan's back and guided him toward the exit. You fired them. That's personnel. I'm talking about policy, and I'm talking about culture. He stopped at the jet bridge door and turned back one last time to address the entire cabin, his voice now projecting to every passenger. My apologies to all of you for this delay. Your flight is grounded because Global Air has demonstrated that it cannot provide a safe and equitable environment for its passengers. I trust Captain Miller will handle your accommodations. As for me and my son, we'll be finding another way to Washington. He turned. Ms. Jenkins, he nodded. My staff will be in touch. And with that, Governor Elias Thompson, his son Morgan, and his 2 security agents swept off the plane, leaving behind a cabin of stunned passengers, a terrified station manager, and the career-ending wreckage of Sophia Adler and Max Jennings. The walk from Gate B42 to the CEO's temporary office in the flagship lounge was the longest walk of David Miller's life. He was speed-walking, phone pressed to his ear, trying to get ahead of the governor. No, Sandra, I don't care if he's on stage. Interrupt him, Miller whisper-shouted into the phone to Michael Vance's assistant. Tell him it's a code red. Tell him Governor Thompson is coming to his office and the deal is dead. Dead! I don't know why. Something on Flight 121. Just stop him. He burst through the doors of the Global Air Lounge just as Governor Thompson and his entourage were approaching. The lounge, usually a haven of quiet luxury, was a flurry of activity. PR people were milling about, and a small temporary stage with a podium bearing the Global Air logo and the New York State seal stood ready. Michael Vance, the CEO of Global Air, was just stepping off the stage, his face pale, his phone in his hand. He was a tall man, usually radiating confidence, but now he looked like he'd seen a ghost. He must have just gotten the message. Elias, Vance said, intercepting the governor with a forced, panicked smile. What? What's this I'm hearing? A problem with the flight. We can fix it. Whatever it is, we'll fix it. Governor Thompson didn't stop, forcing the CEO to walk backward as he and Morgan moved toward the private office. Michael, you and I are going to talk. But first, I want you to meet my son, Morgan. Vance stopped, flustered, and looked at Morgan. A pleasure to meet you, young man. I'm so sorry. I hear there was a mix-up. A mix-up, Governor Thompson repeated, his voice dangerously flat. He ushered Morgan into the private office, followed by Vance. His security detail stood outside the door. Is that what you call it when your lead flight attendant and gate agent try to have a 17-year-old child arrested for the crime of... What was it, Morgan? Sitting in 1A while black, I think, Morgan said, his voice quiet but steady. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a cold anger he'd inherited from his father. They accused him of having a fraudulent ticket, the governor continued. They tried to move him to the back where he belongs. They called him aggressive when he politely refused. They were about to have officers drag him off the plane. Michael Vance's face went from pale to ashen. Elias, I had no idea. This is appalling. It's just 2 employees, 2 bad apples. I'll have them terminated. Their badges will be revoked before you leave this airport. I swear it. You already said that, Michael, or your man Miller did, the governor said, sitting down and motioning for Morgan to do the same. He was in control. This was his room now. This isn't about 2 bad apples. This is about the tree. This is about a culture you've allowed to fester, where an employee feels perfectly comfortable, perfectly empowered to look at a paying customer and decide, based on the color of his skin and the clothes he's wearing, that he doesn't belong. Vance was sweating. Elias, that is not. We do sensitivity training. We have initiatives. Your initiatives are worthless, Elias shot back. Your sensitivity training is a joke. I'm here to announce a $500 million state investment, and your company, the one I'm supposed to be championing, just racially profiled my son. What does that say to the people of New York? What does that say to my constituents? It's unacceptable, Vance stammered. It's worse than unacceptable, Michael. It's a liability, and I'm not tying my administration to it. Elias, please, Vance pleaded, his corporate swagger completely gone. Don't kill the deal. Think of the jobs. 5,000 jobs. You can't let the actions of two morons destroy that. You want to save this, Michael, the governor said, leaning forward. Firing them is the start. It's not the solution. I don't want their heads. I want change. Anything, Vance said, grasping at the straw. Anything. Tell me what you need. First, the governor said, you're coming with me. We're going back to that gate. My son's flight is cancelled. You're going to stand in front of those passengers, the ones your company left stranded, and you are going to apologize to them personally. Not your station manager. You. Vance flinched but nodded. Okay, done. Second, you're not just firing Sophia Adler and Max Jennings. You're flagging their files, permanently. I want to make sure they never work in a customer-facing role in this industry again. I want their severance voided for cause. I want this to hurt. Consider it done, Vance said immediately. Third, the governor said, and this is the big one. I want a complete, top-to-bottom, independent review of your company's implicit bias and de-escalation training. And I don't mean your HR department. I mean a firm I choose. And you're going to pay for it. And you're going to implement every single one of their recommendations, publicly. You are going to release the data on passenger complaints, cross-referenced by demographic, for the last 5 years. You're going to put sunlight on this. Vance hesitated. Elias, that could be damaging, expensive, the governor asked. Welcome to the cost of doing business. You do that, all of that. And then you come to Albany next week and explain to me, my staff, and my general counsel why that $500 million deal should even be discussed. That's blackmail, Vance whispered. No, Michael, Governor Thompson said, standing up. That is accountability. It's a concept your people seem to have forgotten. Let's go. Those passengers are waiting for their apology. The scene back at Gate B42 was one of muted chaos. The passengers from Flight 121 were milling about, angry and confused. Captain Miller was trying to explain the indefinite mechanical delay, but no one was buying it. They had all seen the governor. They knew what had really happened. Then the crowd parted. Governor Elias Thompson strode back to the gate, not with the station manager, but with Michael Vance, the CEO of Global Air. Morgan was beside his father, his head held high. Vance, looking like a man walking to his own execution, stepped up to the podium, his hands shaking so much he could barely hold the microphone. Good afternoon, Vance stammered. My name is Michael Vance. I am the CEO of Global Air. A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. Phones were raised. This was a show. Earlier today, on this flight, 2 of my employees failed to uphold the values of this company. They failed to treat a passenger, this young man, Morgan Thompson, with the dignity and respect he deserved. What happened was not a mix-up. It was not a misunderstanding. It was a disgusting and inexcusable case of racial profiling. The admission hung in the air, stunningly direct. The man in 2D was filming, his jaw on the floor. Stella Jenkins was watching, a small, grim smile on her face. "On behalf of the entire Global Air family," Vance continued, his voice cracking, "I want to offer my deepest, most profound apology. First, to Morgan and Governor Thompson, and second, to all of you, whose travel has been so severely disrupted by this incident." He went on, announcing that the flight was, indeed, cancelled. He promised every passenger a full refund, a $1,000 travel voucher, and immediate rebooking on the next available flights, even on competing airlines, at Global Air's expense. He promised a full investigation. He promised zero tolerance. It was a masterclass in damage control, delivered by a man who was clearly being forced to do it. While Vance spoke, Governor Thompson quietly conferred with Stella Jenkins. "Ms. Jenkins, my Chief of Staff will take your full statement. It appears you're the key witness." "I'd be honored, Governor," she replied. "And if you decide to pursue this further, my firm would be happy to represent Morgan, pro bono." "Thank you, Stella. We'll be in touch," the governor said. As Vance finished his humiliating speech, Morgan finally spoke to his father. "Are you really going to cancel the deal, Dad?" Elias looked at his son. "I'm going to make them earn it, Morgan. They wanted a partnership with New York. Fine. They're about to find out that a partnership with me means you're held to a higher standard." He looked back at the gate, where the two officers who had been called were now giving their statements to a grim-faced airport supervisor. "The world is run by people who show up, Morgan," the governor said, "and it's protected by people who speak up. You did your part. Ms. Jenkins did hers. Now, I do mine. The hard karma for Sophia Adler and Max Jennings was just beginning. Their walk off the plane was only the first step. The walk to the HR office was the next. But the real destination was a place far worse: irrelevance. Sophia Adler was in a state of shock. She was sitting in a sterile, windowless room in the airport's operations center. Max Jennings was across from her, bouncing his knee, muttering, "We're so fired. We are so fired." "Shut up, Max," Sophia snapped, though her voice wavered. "It was a mistake, a seating discrepancy. They'll protect us. The Union." "The Union," Max laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "Did you see who that was? That was Elias Thompson, the governor. He wasn't just on the news, he is the news. And you called his kid aggressive." He was non-compliant," Sophia insisted, the word sounding hollow even to her. The door opened. It wasn't their union rep. It was Mr. Miller, the station manager, and two members of corporate security. Miller's face was a mask of cold fury. "Sophia Adler, Max Jennings," Miller said, his voice void of all emotion. "As of 14:30 Eastern Time, your employment with Global Air is terminated. For cause." "For cause?" Sophia shrieked. "I've been with this airline for 15 years. You can't just—" "For gross misconduct," Miller continued, reading from a script. "For violation of company policy, harassment of a passenger, and actions resulting in severe financial and reputational damage to the airline. Your security badges are deactivated. Your travel privileges are revoked. Security will escort you to your lockers and then off the property. You are not to contact any Global Air employees. Your final, non-severance paycheck will be mailed to you." You can't!" Sophia was crying now, the angry, hot tears of someone who had been caught. "We just did," Miller said. He tossed 2 file folders on the table. "These are copies of your termination notices. I suggest you read them." Max Jennings just put his head in his hands. He was done. But for Sophia, the karma was just getting started. It wasn't enough to be fired. She was about to be made an example of. She lawyered up, of course. She tried to sue Global Air for wrongful termination, claiming she was being made a scapegoat. The airline's legal department, on direct orders from Michael Vance, didn't just defend the suit, they countersued. They countersued Sophia Adler for breach of contract and gross negligence, citing the Elias Thompson clause in their new training manual, a clause that didn't exist, but it sounded good. More importantly, they released the evidence. They released the statement from Stella Jenkins. They released the statements from 5 other first-class passengers. They released the audio from the cockpit, where Sophia could be heard clearly saying, "I have a non-compliant passenger in 1A. He's aggressive." And the captain's subsequent, "Aggressive? He sounds like a polite kid, Sophia." And worst of all, they released her file. It turned out that Sophia Adler had a pattern. Over her 15-year career, she had amassed 22 passenger complaints, and 19 of those complaints were from non-white passengers. It was a clear, undeniable history of bias. Her wrongful termination suit was laughed out of court. She was blacklisted. Her name was now toxic. No other airline would touch her. The union, seeing the mountain of evidence, quietly dropped her case. She had gone from the lead flight attendant on a premium route to unemployable in the span of an afternoon. Max Jennings's fate was quieter, but no less devastating. He didn't have a 15-year history. He was just a guy in his 30s trying to move up. He had seen Sophia Adler, a senior employee, make a call, and he had backed her play. He chose the wrong side. He didn't fight the termination. He just took his box of belongings and walked out of JFK, his career in aviation over. He had escalated when he should have de-escalated. He had accused when he should have investigated. He had failed the simplest test of customer service. He didn't listen. He bounced around for a while. He tried to get a job at another airport, but the aviation world is small. The story of the governor's son had spread like wildfire. No one wanted the guy who had backed the wrong horse in such a spectacular public fashion. He ended up losing his apartment in Queens. The last anyone heard, Max Jennings was working as a dispatcher for a regional trucking company in New Jersey, a night shift, routing trucks on a computer screen. A bitter, silent reminder of the day he tried to flex authority he didn't have on a kid who had more power in his pinky finger than Max had in his whole life. The hard karma wasn't just losing a job, it was the what if. What if he had just looked at the boarding pass and said, "My apologies, sir. Let me check the manifest." What if he had told Sophia, "Hang on, let's verify this." One small moment of professionalism could have saved his career. But he chose arrogance, and he paid for it. The karma for Global Air was just as profound. They didn't get the $500 million tax credit. Not that year. Governor Thompson put the deal on ice indefinitely. Instead, they got the independent audit. And it was brutal. The report, which the governor's office leaked to the press, was titled "A Culture of Bias, a Systemic Failure at Global Air." It exposed weak training, flawed complaint handling, and a management structure that protected senior employees like Sophia Adler. The stock dipped 12%. Michael Vance, the CEO, was promoted to a non-functional vice chairman role 6 months later, a golden parachute to get him out of the C-suite. Global Air was forced to spend over $50 million in a single year on a mandatory, new, top-to-bottom training program run by the firm Stella Jenkins just happened to be on the board of. The hard karma, for everyone involved, wasn't a single event. It was a chain reaction of consequences, all triggered by one moment of bigotry and one text message. 1 year later, Morgan Thompson sat on the floor of his new dorm room at Georgetown University, surrounded by unpacked boxes. He was in D.C. after all, just as he'd planned. He picked up a framed photo of himself and his father, taken on the steps of the governor's mansion just a few weeks prior. Both were smiling, but Morgan's smile was different now, less the easy grin of a teenager, and more the measured expression of someone who had been forced to understand the world's sharp edges far too young. The incident on Global Air Flight 121 felt like a lifetime ago, but its echoes were a constant presence. It had, quite literally, defined his transition to adulthood. He'd written his primary college application essay, not about his academic achievements or his debate team victories, but about that 45-minute ordeal. He titled it, "People Like Me." In the essay, he hadn't focused on the anger. He'd written about the crushing, terrifying feeling of powerlessness. He described the hot shame of being looked at as a fraud, the desperate calculations in his head. Do I let them arrest me? Will that make it better or worse? Will anyone believe me? And then he wrote about the sudden, jarring shift when his father's name was spoken. He wrote about the sickening realization that his entire fate, his truth, his very freedom, had hinged not on his innocence, but on his connections. He'd concluded the essay with the words his father had spoken to him that day, words that now felt branded onto his soul. What happened to you was wrong, Morgan. But the real tragedy is what would have happened if I wasn't the governor. They would have dragged you off. They would have arrested you. And it would have been your word against theirs. Your privilege isn't that you fly first class. Your privilege is that your voice was heard. Now, your job is to use it to speak for the people who aren't. Georgetown and every other school he applied to hadn't just accepted him, they had actively recruited him. He was a symbol now, and he was still learning to live with the weight of that. He'd declared his major, public policy, with a minor in law. He was no longer just his father's son. He was a young man with a purpose, forged in the hostile cabin of Flight 121. For Sophia Adler, there was no new beginning, only a definitive, humiliating end. Her fate was a far cry from the promising future Morgan was building. After her termination, she had been arrogant, defiant. She'd hired a lawyer and filed a multi-million-dollar wrongful termination suit against Global Air, claiming she was a loyal 15-year employee being made a public scapegoat for corporate negligence. It was a fatal miscalculation. Global Air, on direct orders from a CEO desperate to appease Governor Thompson, didn't just defend the suit. They countersued for gross negligence and reputational damages. And in the discovery phase, they released her file. It was a nuclear bomb. The 22 complaints were one thing, but 19 of them being from non-white passengers was the undeniable pattern. Worse were the internal memos. Supervisors who had coached her but never disciplined her. Colleagues who had filed anonymous complaints about her superiority complex and obvious bias. Her own lawyers, seeing the mountain of evidence and the public relations nightmare, dropped her as a client, citing a breakdown in the attorney-client relationship. The court dismissed her lawsuit with prejudice. She was blacklisted. Her name was toxic. The aviation world, which seemed so vast, was in reality a very small, interconnected community. No airline would touch her. The union, seeing her file, quietly refunded her last month's dues and closed her case. The karma was personal too. Her friends, many of whom were still flight attendants, stopped returning her calls, terrified of being associated with her. Her community, where she had been the picture of the successful, world-traveling professional, now saw her as a pariah. She was the woman from the news, She was last seen a few months later, during the Christmas rush, working a seasonal job at a Macy's in a suburban New Jersey mall. A shopper, a woman named Emily Vance, no relation to the CEO, recognized her. Emily had been in seat 4C on that flight, had seen the whole thing. "Excuse me," Emily said, stepping up to the counter where Sophia was folding sweaters with a frantic, joyless energy. "You're Sophia Adler, aren't you?" Sophia's head snapped up. Her eyes, once sharp and commanding, were now dull and haunted. "Can I help you find a size?" she recited, her voice a monotone. "I was on that flight," Emily said quietly, not with malice, but with a kind of finality. "Flight 1 to 21. I saw what you did to that boy." Sophia's face, pale and tired, flushed a deep, blotchy red. The mask of retail politeness shattered. I was following procedure," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "No," Emily said, shaking her head. "You were being a bully, and you got what you deserved. I hope you learned something." Sophia just stared at her, her hands frozen on a cashmere blend. The hot, angry tears she'd cried in the HR office were gone, replaced by the cold, permanent tears of bitter resentment. She was a queen reduced to a serf, haunted by the ghost of her own arrogance, her life's work undone by a 17-year-old in a hoodie. Max Jennings's karma was quieter, a private hell of what-ifs. He didn't have the public infamy of Sophia. He was just the guy who backed the wrong play. He was a footnote in the story. But for him, that footnote was the end of his life as he knew it. After his termination, he found that the Global Air incident was the first thing that came up in any background check. No airline, no airport, not even a rental car agency would hire him for a customer-facing role. He had demonstrated, in the most public way possible, a catastrophic lack of judgment. He ended up at a regional trucking logistics company in central New Jersey, working the 3 a.m. to 11 a.m. shift in a windowless room, routing freezer trucks across the tri-state area. His world shrank from the entire globe to a glowing monitor. The silence of the office, broken only by the click of his mouse and the hum of a vending machine, gave him too much time to think. He replayed that day, over and over. He blamed Sophia for her arrogance. He blamed the kid for not just moving. He blamed the governor for his tyrannical overreaction. But at 4 a.m., when the caffeine wore off and the self-loathing set in, he knew the truth. All he had to do was check. One button. One look at the passenger manifest. He could have been the hero. He could have calmly said, "Actually, Sophia, the manifest confirms he's in 1A. Let me handle this." He would have looked competent, professional. He might have even gotten a promotion. But he'd chosen to be a henchman. He'd wanted to impress the senior flight attendant, to look tough, to exert the small, petty power of his badge. And for that, he'd lost everything. His girlfriend, tired of his bitter monologues and spiraling depression, had left him. He'd lost his apartment in Queens and now lived in a small, stale-smelling studio near the dispatch center. He was a ghost in his own life, a cautionary tale of a man who failed the simplest test of character. For Global Air, the reckoning was systemic. Governor Thompson had been true to his word. The independent audit was a corporate vivisection. The firm, which Stella Jenkins had personally recommended, uncovered a deeply rotten culture. They found a seniority shield program where complaints against employees with over 10 years of service were automatically routed to a retention specialist instead of a disciplinary body. They found that training modules on de-escalation were 20-minute videos that employees just clicked through. The 400-page report, leaked to the New York Times by the governor's office, was a bombshell. The stock didn't just dip 12%, it cratered, wiping out over $1 billion in market cap in a week. Michael Vance was unceremoniously forced out by the board, his golden parachute renegotiated to a fraction of its value. His replacement, a no-nonsense woman named Linda Hayes, began her tenure by playing the passenger 2D's video at her first all-hands meeting. She then initiated the Flight 121 Protocols, a $50 million retraining and accountability program that was now the industry standard. Stella Jenkins, the lawyer from 2B, had become an unlikely celebrity. She'd used her witness testimony and legal expertise to help the governor's staff draft the New York Passenger Bill of Rights, a sweeping piece of state legislation that gave passengers new, powerful recourse against in-flight harassment and discrimination. She was now a paid contributor on a major news network, the go-to expert on passenger advocacy, and Governor Elias Thompson, his opponent screamed, abuse of power. But his base and moderate voters across the state saw something else. They saw a father. They saw a black man who had used his hard-won power to protect his son and hold a faceless corporation accountable. It transformed his political narrative. He wasn't just a policy wonk anymore. He was a fighter. His re-election, once a tough fight, became a landslide. The hard karma, in the end, wasn't a single lightning bolt. It was a slow, meticulous, and crushing realignment of the universe. It was the public disgrace of Sophia Adler, the quiet failure of Max Jennings, the corporate humbling of a billion-dollar company, and the rise of Morgan Thompson. All of it, every last consequence, was triggered by one simple, ugly choice. A choice to see a boy in a hoodie as less than human. It was a brutal lesson in accountability, proving that in a world connected by a single text, you never, ever know who you're dealing with. The story of Morgan Thompson is a powerful reminder that arrogance and prejudice, especially from a position of authority, carry a heavy price. Sophia Adler and Max Jennings didn't just have a bad day. They made a choice. They chose to judge instead of serve. They chose cruelty over kindness, and in doing so, they triggered an avalanche of hard karma that buried their careers and forced an entire corporation to its knees. This story shows that while we can't always control how people see us, we can control how we react. Morgan stayed calm, Stella Jenkins spoke up, and Governor Thompson wielded his power not for revenge, but for accountability. What do you think? Was the karma they received fair? What would you have done if you were a passenger on that flight? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this story of justice and accountability, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and be sure to subscribe to the channel for more powerful real-life drama. Your support helps us keep telling these important stories.